All right. Welcome back, everyone. Craig here. No Jonah, but modern papist. Ryan, welcome.
Thanks. Glad to be here.
Yeah, we started talking about we got on a similar thread about the TLM and some of that last week, and I've been following your content for a while and looking for an opportunity to get on screen with you, and so this was a great opportunity. So thanks for joining us.
Yeah, no problem.
For I guess for your audience that doesn't know me, I'm one of the hosts of the Uncharted Catholic Man. We've been doing this for about a year, and we talk about different stuff than you do. But for those in my audience that don't know who you are, why don't you tell us a little bit about your show, and then let's start talking.
Oh, sure. Yeah. So my channel is Modern Papist is primarily for its first order is for my kids. It's very much a journal of if I were to die, it would be a way that my kids could be like, oh, that's how Dad understood what was going on.
Mm-hmm.
That's why he told us to do this or to do that or something. And I talk about that with that in mind because it helps me orient what I'm saying and it prevents me from saying anything silly. So, but it's I tend not to hit fad issues without bringing up, let's just say, like evergreen content. So, the whole thing with Cardinal Zen, for example, I'll pull out, okay, well, a bishop talking about a YouTuber is kind of a big deal.
Yeah.
And it should happen more. So, but I also have other content where it's more statistically oriented, where I'll bring up statistics within the Catholic world and compare them. For example, I have a video on comparing the attitudes and behaviors of the TLM done by Liturgy Guy in 2019, and then surveys for the same attitudes with the Novus Ordo, and I update them and steelman them as best as I can. And then I compared the two and basically, explain the difference given my expertise and try to make sense of what I think a lot of people, I try to make sense with the data that I think a lot of people skim over and lack the nuance to explain. So those are my angles for my channel.
Well, it seems like I've seen some of those videos, and it seems like you get quite a few views. So people are hungry for that more than just punchlines and dramatics that I think some shows and podcasters fall into.
Yeah, and I also try to be very casual. So I'm not very big on like wearing like suit and ties or pretending like I basically state, okay, well, I'm a Catholic layman giving my opinion, and then when it comes to statistics, I might mention something like, this is what I study, this is what I work in, this is my expertise, something to that effect, just to state it. If that's the first video you see, like why random person is giving an analysis. So yeah. So.
And we're gonna talk hopefully or primarily about the TLM issue, and I think at least I want to kind of be a little transparent about where I stand on that for people that are wondering. So I'm a former TLM. I sometimes I'll say I'm a recovering traditionalist, not in a mean spirited way, but I was a very hardcore traditionalist in sort of my late high school and early college years. Went to the TLM, thought everything that happened with Vatican II afterward was this huge mistake, and just kind of riding that out until we could restore order was sort of my approach. And I ended up, not just because of sort of ideological reasons, but for a variety of reasons, stopped going to the TLM regularly. And one of the big things that I struggled with personally was I could no longer reconcile this idea that this is Christ's church and the gates of hell won't prevail against it. And yet Vatican II and everything that happened was this just big aberration that we just have to, like, we're just all going to go back to the way it used to be. I couldn't make that make sense. So I figured I'm going to have to figure out a way to come to grips with, uh, you know, Vatican II and the Novus Ordo, and so that's how I've tried to reconcile that. So anyway, that's where I am at. I have great respect for the TLM. I know a lot of people that go there. We go to a very reverent Novus Ordo, and for us, it's important because there's a parish, there's a Catholic school where my kids go to school, and so that's kind of where I come from.
Yeah, and for me, I used to also go to a TLM. I don't any longer. I go to a Reverend Novus Ordo. My kids do go to Catholic school, but they don't go to the, like, it's not the same parish.
Yeah.
But it's a very similar boat as you, where there are I know a lot of people who go to the TLM that when you say, like, those that go to the TLM, like, and then insert whatever opinion you have, um, usually unjust and whitewashed over. So that's my opinion about, like, the TLM NO
Mhm.
distinguish or difference. Sorry.
Okay. All right. So with that in mind, and I'm hoping you probably have a better sense for what is going on. But when I got introduced to the TLM back in the '90s, I feel like was it Ecclesia Dei? Was that the one that John Paul II did that kind of allowed the indult Latin Mass? That's when it kind of started showing up.
That I don't know. I'm sorry. Like, yeah, I don't know about the '90s stuff.
Okay. I'm a
Sorry.
little I'm a little older. I'm a little older than you, but I think that John Paul II kind of opened the door more or less for the TLM, and that's kind of how we started going.
Mhm.
And then, I think with Benedict, he kind of further opened the doors, and
Right.
then things have happened since then. So can you kind of bring us up to speed on kind of what was the most recent crackdown, and then what's going on now that you're aware of?
Oh yeah. So, like, the motu proprio, I always screw up this name. The Traditionis Custodes. Custodes?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. I'm just really bad with Latin, and that's really funny because we sing Latin for our ordinaries. But yeah, so it restricted the TLM in a severe way. So, like, you'll have basically up until the point where you have to ask the Vatican to give permission for a priest to say the TLM on a diocesan level.
Mhm.
Um, which, if you're, it seems fairly strict. But the intent of that, so the stated intent in the at least the translation, right? Like, I'm looking at it off screen just in case I miss something.
Yep.
Um, uh, the stated intent was unity, to bring unity into the Latin Rite. And so, and I don't think we can miss that part, because I think a lot of people will kind of scoff at it, and there's a lot of reasons they give to scoff at it, but I think the stated intent is, I think, important. That unity is the key, because the Latin Rite is the only rite that has two different forms of the Mass. And so, whereas, like, the Eastern rites, they've got high and low masses, but that's not, or high and low divine liturgies, but depending on which one it is, that's not the same. So, and very recently, there's been a rumor that there's kind of a sunset law. So, like, going into law a little bit, there's the sunset period of 3 years of, after 3 years, there's going to be the hammer coming down on diocesan. Like, that's the rumor, and there does seem to be evidence for that, but that, again, is just, as of right now, highly speculative. Well, it's not highly speculative, but I would say it's speculative rumor with some circumstantial evidence. So, not to get, like, legalistic, but I don't want to give the wrong impression on, like, what the Pope is doing if he's not actually doing it. So,
And it sounds like there's some, I don't want to say urgency, but it sounds like it may not be long if that's in fact what happens. It may be coming soon. Is that what you're hearing too?
Right. Like I think it's a lot of people are saying it's July 16th, which is like
That's close.
2 weeks.
Yeah.
Yeah, 2 weeks. And I think that's when that would be the third year. Like that would be when the Moto Proprio came out. I think. Let me see. Usually there's a date, but yeah, July 16th, 2021.
Wow. It doesn't seem like it's been 3 years.
No, it does not.
So, can you because you probably know this better than I can. What was the scope of the impact of the prior document, the 3 year, the one, I'm not even going to try and say the name, the one 3 years ago? Like, did a lot of parishes or a lot of Latin masses get axed? Like, I have no idea the scope of it and how many were affected by it.
Well, so like a lot of people ended up let's see. So yeah, so the a lot of diocesan parishes got either closed down or there was a request to keep them open. And there were some cases where FSSP, the fraternity of St. Peter. Oh
Yep.
man, yeah, they were removed from I'm sorry, not a parish, a diocese. So bishops went so far as to remove them, because I mean that's their purview, like that's their authority. Whether or not you agree with it, like that's what they can do. But it was in response to this, which doesn't exactly like suggest good things, right? Like, like it's kind of like, okay, we're given the permission to do it, we're just going to do it. But yeah, it was definitely to limit TLM because there was an understanding that the TLM was causing division, and that's like a variety. Like, there's a variety of ways that could be looked at. Like that point by itself can be looked at like in a huge scope, only because the only thing that's stated is to bring unity to the church, right? And so to say that is to imply that there isn't unity with the TLM, and that's. I'm just trying to. Sorry, I'm just. See what else. Yeah,
Well,
that's it for now.
yeah, I mean, it seems to me, and I think that there's some of the comments that are, like, I'm gonna put this one up here. I don't know that many people stopped going to the TLM. They all just went other places. Like every person I know,
Yep.
that had a TLM mass affected by it just went somewhere else. Like I don't know if they didn't think they were gonna, like, if they just thought people were gonna be that easily discouraged. But people drive hours to go to the TLM. I mean, the people that
Right.
are committed to it are gonna go somewhere, and if they lose the FSSP, they're gonna go to the institute. They're gonna go to a shrine, and if that's gone, guess what? They're going to SSPX, and maybe maybe worse. I don't know.
Maybe worse. Yeah, well, like that. Yeah, because like my pastor and I did a video where we were talking about, because there's like the pipeline. There's this pipeline of trads leaving the faith, and they'll go sedevacantist, ortho bro, become an ortho bro, or like become agnostic or atheist. And there's, for every one of those categories, there's people that are prevalent that have done that, either on Twitter or YouTube. Like the spaces of social of Catholic social, oh my gosh, networking, there we go. Like they're prevalent, and unfortunately, like it's a known thing. It's kind of like the reverse. We compared it to, so we see the yeah, Exhibit A, Kevin.
Yeah.
And so we see from the left, right, like the modernist influence of creating a very lazy faith, a very lukewarm faith. We see that in mass attendance. Oh, the amount of people have risen up, like skyrocketed since the council, but the real number of faithful Catholics is looked at through the lens of those that go to mass. Like, that's the indicator you want to see. It's not baptisms, it's whether they weekly go to mass.
Yeah.
And if that rate drops, that's really bad. And right now it's sitting around 20 to 23%. Even though we have around 70 million Catholics. So like that comes to be about like 15 million, which is, not a lot when you started at 70. Whereas like prior and during the council, it was about 75%. And it was declining during the prior to the council. So like it's not the council's fault for the initial decline. The implementation though of the council had a huge influence, and so like that's the other thing. So I don't want to go into derail this, but all of that is connected. And what you said where what is it? They just went somewhere else. Like, yeah, that's exactly what happened. Like what Mark brought up, like there was a TLM by me that closed down. I don't want to say closed down. They had 4 masses on Sunday, and one of them was a TLM.
Mm-hmm.
And they stopped it. And so those people just went to the nearest TLM. And so it was like, yeah, like you're going to see an influx in that. And it's going to look like there's more people going to the faith. So this also creates like a confounding variable of why there's an increase. Well, the reason why is because the amount of possibilities of where a TLM could be has shrunk. And so those that can go to the other TLMs will go to the other TLMs. So,
yeah, I really worry about what's going to happen if there really is a sunset on this, because I mean, if their goal was to get all these people to stay and go to let's say the best Novus Ordo round, I think that's going to be a small majority of people, a small portion of the population. I don't know. I guess I don't hang around that community enough to know how committed people are to that and what they'll do if the TLM truly is taken away from them. But I think a lot of people are going to go looking elsewhere.
I agree with you. I think if there was an axe on the diocesan level, that there would be a split, and the SSPX would be saturated. They have valid masses, but not everybody has an SSPX by them, right? Like, so it becomes this problem of, okay, so am I just going to go Eastern Rite? Like, if that happens here, we have in the Archdiocese of Detroit, we have a Institute of Christ the King Sovereign Priest shrine, St. Joseph, and that's where that's probably not going to be touched because that's an institute. But the others that are diocesan, like we have about, 8 or 9 Eastern Rites in the Archdiocese. Within a mile of where I live, I have a Byzantine, a Latin Rite, and a Chaldean Rite. If I expand it to 5 miles, I have a Ukrainian Rite, a Maronite Rite. Like we have a lot of Eastern rites, and I think that's the next step, because people still want to be like, I sincerely believe people will understand that they still need to be with Rome. They're not going to just jump ship to the Antiochian. Yeah, I think I said that right that time. But or a Greek Orthodox, or become an agnostic.
Yeah, that part of it I've always been fuzzy on. I mean, I've always been fuzzy on what the status of the SSPX is relative to Rome. Like, if you can go to mass there, if you're fulfilling your Sunday obligation, but you're not encouraged to go there. Is that more or less accurate? Or
that seems to be the case, although I'm not an expert on it. I know they have valid masses, and but that's about it. I don't know about the faculties of confession anymore, because we had a year of Jubilee where Pope Francis extended to the
Yeah.
SSPX the ability to do confessions,
Yeah.
which it's like really weird. Like, I mean, that's a really weird thing to say for a group that's not schismatic. And I'm not saying they are schismatic, but they are they are considered an irregular
Yeah.
situation.
Yeah.
And so, what I typically go by is, does the priest use them? I'm sorry, does the bishop use them? If the bishop uses them in their diocese, okay, that's good. If they don't, then like you have to be like, okay, well, why aren't they with the diocese? Like, why aren't they, like, that's a real big issue. I understand that they're like an order, but like that order is still within the, it's going to be within a diocese. And so, again, I'm not an expert, but that's typically what I go to, because I know the ordinary is always like appealing to the bishop of the area is usually just a good thing to do generally.
In those Eastern Rite ones that you mentioned, are those are all under the umbrella of Rome, so they are considered. I don't know. Do we even describe them as irregular? But it's permissible and valid for Catholics to go to mass there.
Yeah. So like, like I like going to if I go to an Eastern Rite, I like going to the Chaldean ones, which they're Catholics from Iraq. And so Eastern Rite is what do you call it? They have their own liturgy and culture within the rite, and it's being preserved. And like, it's really hard to go from rite to rite. Like, if you're a Chaldean and you want to go to the Roman Rite, that's hard to do outside of marriage. Like, for example, if a woman becomes married to a man and the man's the Latin Rite, like if you are a Latin Rite and you wanted to, like, the other way is easier, because like we're kind of like vanilla, right? It's kind of like because they want to ultimately preserve what is being passed down. Like, the Chaldeans come from a tradition from St. Thomas the Apostle, and a lot of them actually do, but like for them it's St. Thomas the Apostle in the place where Abraham was. And so like that's kind of like a big deal. Like, and they were also for a period of time, like most Eastern rites are like this. Like, a lot of people will, it's really frustrating when we like talk about the Orthodox as if like they haven't been coming over, but they absolutely have. Like, Chaldeans used to not be part of the church, and then they came back to the church. I think that was like hundreds of years ago. They're kind of a special case. But then when it comes to like the Byzantine, well, like that's Greek, like that's the Greek Orthodox. And there's others that do the same thing, where like they fit to the different groups of the synod, like the Orthodox synod. And so they have absolutely been coming over. It's just a matter of, we don't call them Orthodox anymore. We call them Eastern rites. And so what is it? When Pope St. Paul, I don't know the order. I suck at the order of that. But Pope John Paul II, when he said we have to breathe with both lungs of the church, he wasn't talking about the Orthodox. He was talking about the Eastern rites, because that's where the Orthodox that came back to Rome are. And because they also focus on, like, they have a lot of the same mysticism, except they are within the realm of understanding with Rome, as opposed to, like, for example, each bishop in the Orthodox can choose whether or not like abortion or contraception is allowed.
This is the Eastern Rite or the Orthodox?
The Orthodox. And
Okay.
so that's kind of like a crazy thing for Catholics. Like, it's just like, what are you talking about? Or they'll give circumstances, because they're by the bishop. Like, whatever the bishop says, like the bishop, like they look at bishops as like first among equals for the bishop of or the Patriarch of Constantinople. And so he's filling in for Rome, according to them. But like sorry, we're going way off topic, but it's
Oh.
it's important because people will be looking at them and saying, well, they're the true faith. But it's like, well, you look at the Greek Orthodox, though, they allow divorce. They have liturgical divorce. And that fundamentally doesn't make any sense
Mm-hmm.
with the understanding of the church and marriage being a reflection of that.
Mm-hmm.
You can't dissolve marriage. And
Mm-hmm.
so, what do you mean that you can dissolve marriage? Does that mean God can dissolve us,
Mm-hmm.
in union with him? Because that's what it's implying. So sorry, but yeah,
It's okay. So I want to respect how you want to handle this, but it was sort of in a jest. But there was some suggestions that I don't know Taylor Marshall as Taylor Marshall, or just sort of that.
oh, that yeah. What started this? Yeah, that's
Yeah.
fine.
So
We can talk about it.
yeah, go ahead. Why don't you give me your perspective on what is the story and what's your perspective on what if anything that had to do with this crackdown?
Okay, so what was it? It was Eric. I always forget his last name. Simmons.
Simmons or some yeah.
Yeah. So Crisis, I think it's Crisis Magazine editor. And so we were talking about he was asking the question and making a statement at the same time of it'd be silly to suggest that Taylor Marshall had anything to do with the motu proprio. And I was like, well, yes, responsible, yes. Fully responsible,
Right.
no.
Okay.
Because okay, this is all right. This is what it gets me. It's this idea, and this goes with what Cardinal Zen did today or yesterday, right? This understanding of a bishop correcting a YouTuber. Why would Cardinal Zen correct Michael Lofton?
Mm-hmm.
Because Michael Lofton has an audience in which he is giving a bad impression of a cardinal in a very not great way. I'm sorry. I'm trying to word it as charitably as possible, but at the same time, not
mm-hmm.
that was not the way you correct a cardinal.
Yeah.
And you certainly don't talk down to him.
Right.
And if you see the video that Michael Lofton did of that comes across in spades. And so you don't do that. With Taylor Marshall, who has significantly more subscribers, he has almost 1 million subscribers. So the idea that he is not being paid attention to is just an asinine thought. It just doesn't make any sense. Of course he has influence, and of course he's being paid attention to. He is the biggest Catholic YouTuber on the planet. And then going through the list of things that he's done, right? When it came to the Pachamama incident, which I agree, I think if there's an idol in there, you get rid of the idol. Okay. I'm very much in favor of that. The problem is that he brought the guy that did it on a show and then said he paid for it.
Yeah.
So now he's boasting. You didn't need to say that. There's no reason to do that. And then he got tapped by President Trump. And so now he's a political actor. And so this was all before the motu proprio. And so on top of that, he will ask questions that have wide influence that he actually, so I'm going to be very, very open about this. He ended up blocking me. And so one of the reasons why he blocked
just recently, right? Within the last
on my daughter's, around my daughter's birthday.
I think I remember that.
So
I got blocked at the same time. One of my channels got blocked at the same time. He was in a bad mood or something.
And so it was around the Candace Owens thing.
Yeah.
And that's what he blocked me on, because he was appealing to the fact that she was Catholic or Christian. And then I was like, well, but there's Matt Walsh and there's Michael Knowles. You can't make this thing you're purposely causing division. And that's what I said. And I stand by that. You could find it on Twitter. It's all there. But the one day prior is probably the one that he didn't like the more so. Because he had asked if I remember correctly, is Pope Francis a heretic?
Oh.
Okay, so that is a clearly divisive question to ask. And when I pressed him on it, he actually responded. So I appreciate him, responding to me. He said, "Oh, it's just a statement. It's just a question." And I'm like, dude, like, I'm a statistician. I used to work for like one of the biggest international surveying companies in the world. That is not just a question. That's a statement.
Yeah.
Like, you can't just do that.
Yeah.
And so he didn't respond after I said that, but it was like really like weird, because I'm not trying to go out of my way to like make him mad or anything, but it's like stuff like that happens on like from his very influential position. And if you're going to think, oh, this guy who has 1 million subscribers on YouTube, who has a regular watch, like hundreds of thousands of views on every video, you're joking to think that he doesn't have some sort of influence on how Pope Francis or people in the Vatican view conservative Catholics who go to the TLM. Like, that makes no sense.
Yeah.
And we don't know for sure. This is speculation on my part, but I think it's well grounded, because we have a political actor who interrupted we have a political actor who interrupted what at the time was the Amazon Synod. And so he interrupted a synod function and boasted about it.
Mm-hmm.
And then has divisive comments on a regular basis. So none of what I'm saying is false.
Yeah.
Because I like it's not false. Like, you can look at his stuff. Does that mean everything he says is wrong? So I just want to clarify this, because I am because I have a lot that I actually owe to Taylor Marshall, because I would not have. So, like, just to, I guess, balance this out, like, Taylor Marshall is the reason why I joined Exodus 90. Why? Because I was watching Taylor Marshall at the time, and he brought the guy that did Exodus 90 on. I got into the group for Exodus 90, and now 3 of those guys are godparents to my kids, and I meet them on a regular basis still. I meet them once every 2 weeks, and I did that starting in 2019. So it's not that I don't owe him, like, thanks for what his show has done. He's done a lot of great things with his shows, but again, there are some things where he's done a lot of bad things, and it's led to it. I don't want to say caught, like, it's probably led to an influence to the motu proprio and the understanding Pope Francis has of, like I said, conservative TLM Catholics, because when he talks about conservative Catholics, he does not seem to like them.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not here to pick on Taylor Marshall, but when I have watched his content, I've always had that same visceral reaction. Like, he'll pose this question as if it's a question, but like Kevin said, it's like, when did you stop beating your wife? It feels like that kind of question, because then he goes out and he gives the impression that he's just there to objectively analyze and ask questions, but it's making a statement. Like, it seems apparent that he is, and it's a little sad to see. It's sad to see someone that I think.
I'm reading the comments. I'm not laughing at you.
Yeah, I think Taylor, and I think really everyone in the space, I think for the most part is genuinely motivated, and certainly was at the beginning of the journey. And I don't know, fame's a hell of a drug.
Yeah.
For the best, for the best of intentions, and when you start monetizing and stuff like that, I mean, most of us, myself included, probably are not disciplined and well grounded enough not to get carried away, and it seems like that's what happened. And like you said, I think people look at him as for better for worse the face of American conservative Catholicism.
Yeah, and that is fundamentally a problem on, like, several levels, because that should be where the bishops are, not where, like, there's popularity. So, like, we've always had celebrities. Like, ancient Greece had celebrities, we have celebrities. there's typically some sort of like, association with politics, which is ironically enough, like Taylor Marshall is associated with that too. But but yeah, it's this idea of like, we're always going to have popular people, and those popular people ideally would be virtuous and point to the church in a wholesome way. Like when something comes out, you shouldn't be expecting like the worst take. Like you should expect you should try to understand whatever document is coming out in light of the previous iterations or the previous teaching, to purposely say, well, this is just another example of vague statements. And to some credit, like that's actually a bad example, because like there's a lot of vague statements that are problematic, that lead to more confusion than clarity. But it's this understanding of not everything is like that. Like when you look at the speaking of Eastern rites, so the Syro-Malabar situation, when that became a problem, so that's like about 400 priests are saying, no, we don't want to change how we stand at the altar. Okay. In your mind, like, do you know about that?
Tell me about it.
In your mind, when I say stand at the altar, which direction do you think those priests are facing?
I would say towards the tabernacle. Would be my guess.
Towards the tabernacle.
Yeah.
That would be wrong. They are actually facing the people. Pope Francis is trying to correct them so that they're facing the tabernacle again, as their tradition was. Like that's what their tradition is. And it was only after the council that they got Latinized. And so like there's a huge movement in all the Eastern rites to get rid of that. And that's to help with trying to get back to the roots of their tradition, their liturgical forms. And so, very like, I don't know if Taylor Marshall talked about this, because I wasn't paying attention to him at the time, but it's very easy to, with a few choice words and not pointing out, to make it look like Pope Francis is against tradition and against this Eastern rite, because we don't hear about Eastern rites.
Yeah.
We hear about typically the Latin rite. And so it's very easy to omit to lead to a conclusion that's not there.
Yeah. Pope Francis cracks down on order and how they stand at the altar, and people, if you leave that information out, people come to make the same assumption I did.
Yeah.
So
and hello to so yeah, there's a lot of people who talk on my chat. So I mean, like, if you want to like engage with them, like, I don't care. You're the one that's hosting, so but if you want to keep talking, we can too. I mean,
this was a while back, and I want to get your comment on them. It was Kevin on Tridecast. I'd like to put this up and get your because Taylor Marshall, as I understand it, was a fairly new convert. Like how, like there's a strange story I've heard that he was like ordained an Anglican priest and then very quickly became a Catholic, and then was this kind of rising star in the church. And then I don't have the time frame down on how quickly he became sort of a traditionalist. Do you have a better sense for how that worked out?
Yeah, because like excuse me. I watched him so I remember watching him like 4 years ago. I'm sorry, not 4 years ago. This 6 years ago. 6 or 5. 6 or 5. Okay, it was 6 or 5. And he was by himself. It was before TNT. So TNT is Taylor and Tim Gordon. Tim Gordon and him, when they got together, like blew up. But what you said was true. He was Anglican. He was an Anglican priest. And then he converted. He was asked to become a priest, and he chose not to. And then he started teaching theology. And a lot of his early videos, you can see that, where he, I think it was for a year or two. I don't know that exact time frame, but he has a lot of videos where it's just, he's talking about natural law. He's talking about precepts of the church. He's talking about a lot of basic things that, we teach in the church. it'll be hard to like, unless they probably won't come up because he has all these other live streams and, you know, videos coming up. So you probably haven't seen them if they're still there and he hasn't hidden them. But early on, his channel was like really helpful.
Yeah.
And very to the point. And then he started making it more of a podcast where he did a live stream. And then that's where TNT happened with Tim Gordon. And then they had a falling out. And then, but like that could be playing a part, right? Like being an Anglican priest and having people under you. And then you're no longer, you no longer have that authority. Like that may be playing a part. I don't know for sure, but, you know, it is something to think about given the dynamic of what's happening, right? Like fame can do a lot of things to you. And so you may like get into a certain way and it like, I'm going to stop because I don't want to like speculate on his interior disposition, but like that, I think that's about it. But like in terms of like the history of what you were saying, I think he's,
Well,
yeah, I think that is correct.
It concerns me when I see guys like that and it's sort of a kind of a bystander, and that I don't consider myself a friend or foe of Taylor Marshall and these other folks. And I remember seeing your interaction with him, and I know enough about you. You know, you are very careful and very charitable, I think, in how you approach things.
Oh, thank you.
And he just couldn't. I mean, he just blocked you, and I'm like, I got blocked. I mean, I got legitimately blocked because I was making fun of him. So fine, but you were being very diplomatic, and you were gone. And if that's the approach, if you block people that you know charitably come towards you for assistance, the only voices you have around you are the people that build you up. You know, the yes man. There's no man in his life. Maybe, I don't know. I mean, again, we're speculating, but part of that is the problem. He's kind of cut other voices out, it seems, dissident voices, I guess, if you will, and that happens to a lot of people, unfortunately, politicians included.
Yeah, so like he what is it? Michael Lofton kind of had the same thing happen where I got blocked by him because him and Edward Fazer were having a problem. Yeah. And I was like, hey, like there's no reason you should be like responding this way. And then Michael made a demand on Edward because they both responded to me. They both responded to me in the same thread. And Michael made a demand of Dr. Fazer, and that was basically like conceding the point before like even going on the, you know, having a show. And, you know, that's unreasonable. Like Dr. Fazer's a smart guy. Like he saw it. And then shortly after, I don't know exactly when, but he ended up blocking me. But I think that it was that exchange that he didn't like. But yeah, like his style of combat, it like, yeah, whatever. I'm not gonna. This isn't a Michael Lofton like review, but
no, there's a pattern because he's a recent convert too, right?
Yeah, so like that's a very interesting. Yeah, I didn't even think about that with Taylor Marshall, but like, yeah, he came from, I believe it was Orthodox.
Okay.
And even before then, I think he was something else, but I don't know what it was. So I think he's changed a few times, and now he's settling on. Like, yeah, it's I'm not trying. I mean, I'm not trying to like brag or anything, but it's a very interesting thing though, because like at the end of the day, what you're saying is right. Like, I don't try to vindictively go after people, and because that's a waste of time. I have 5 kids and a wife.
Yeah,
right? Like and a job. Like that's not my job, and so if someone is going to like waste my time, like I typically mute them. I don't always block them unless they're being like, unless they have like the pantheon of colors and pronoun designations and a bunch of other things.
Yeah,
like, I typically don't block.
Yeah, yeah, I'm the same way. I mean, of course, I guess maybe if I had Taylor Marshall's following, I would be more blocking people. But I you gotta work pretty hard to get blocked by me, because I can tolerate a lot of stuff. Unless, like you said, unless you're really being like really vicious and crude or whatever, you could say whatever you want to
Right.
me. And I think there is, unfortunately, that something happens to guys or gals that rise to they lose the sense that these voices are important to me, and I need to like I need to be held in check like everyone. I need to not get carried away, and I think it's very easy to start blocking those voices, ignoring or whatever, and then all you hear is people that are cheering you on, and those may not be the best the best voices for you.
Well, right. And like when it came to Taylor Marshall, as someone who watched him, because like I would quite literally do this in my day. I'd work at my job, and when I would start doing like data manipulation or some sort of like tedious thing, I just put on like Taylor Marshall and then TNT. Like it was, I actually looked forward to listening to TNT because they gave two different perspectives. One was from California, one was from Texas, and they were giving their perspectives on something that it was conservative Catholicism. It's what a lot of people wanted to hear because they're starving for it in a lot of places, and now it's starting to come back. But like it was really frustrating to listen to TNT. I'm sorry, not frustrating. It was really well, it wasn't like heartbreaking, but it was like disappointing when you hear, oh, TNT is not a thing anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the moment, I think, that Taylor Marshall went, like, that was the moment that I think he started when he separated from Tim Gordon. Because like their dynamic was great. They held each other in check and they both knew their stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And like, so it was like two smart guys having a conversation, and they were good. Like they get, they had their edgy parts, but it was nothing like off the wall. And when they stopped,
Yeah.
Taylor started getting into a lot of I would probably say confirmation bias based like podcasts. Like he'd be like, I'm going to ask an SSPX what the relationship he has with Rome. And I'm like, okay, no, you should have like a canon lawyer.
Yeah.
And the SSPX priest or something like that, where it's like you're not just showing one side, because that's like asking, hey, Unitarian or what is it? Is it Unitarian? No, it's universal, whatever. Like you ask one of the Protestant groups that aren't actually Christian, and you're like, hey, are you a Christian? Of course they're going to say yes.
Yeah.
So it's like you're not doing a balanced interview or discussion. You're doing a discussion of again, confirmation bias.
Well,
and again, I'm saying this as someone who's like a viewer now. Like, I'm not, and I followed him for a long time with his stuff. But again, like after the TNT thing, it was just, that's when I think it went off.
Well, and somewhat of his stature that's purposeful. Like he could get anyone on his show he wanted. Like we have to scrap and claw to get people on, and I would love to have people of a certain perspective come on and talk to us, but we're nobodies. But he can get anyone on his show he wanted. So if he wanted to, he could get opposing viewpoints, very credible, articulate, people that can defend a particular position if he wanted to.
Right. Well, like that's how I ended up learning about like a lot of different really good guys. Like Ryan Grant, for example. He was he's a historian. He does authorship of translations of a lot of documents that and writings from people in the church that have not been translated yet. And so he does a very good job with that. And I didn't know about him prior to Taylor Marshall, but now I do. And, I regularly, if I look up something in history, I look to see if Ryan Grant has done anything. Mm-hmm. And so you're absolutely right. He's brought on a lot of great people, but then it's again, like bringing it back to the motu proprio, like he's done a lot of things that of course the hierarchy would look at and be like, okay, well, we need to keep an eye on this guy, and they might look at him, like you said, as a figurehead for conservative Catholicism. Because, like, unfortunately, like, that's the thing, though, right? Like, it is designated conservative and liberal.
Mhm.
And as much as people say, like, well, we don't like to use conservative tones for what's going on, like, some of that's true. Like, for conservative, you have a huge gambit of what conservative means. And you do have a huge gambit for what liberal means. However, where most people sit on the liberal side seems to be much farther than where the conservative side is. And, like, when you start, like, promoting things that, like, the flag, that competes with the Sacred Heart, like, that's
Mhm.
like, and you're pushing that as if, like, it's just a flag and it doesn't mean anything. It's like, okay, well, like, you're either being intellectually dishonest or you're incredibly ignorant on, like, your understanding of flags. Like, but okay, like, sorry, I'm trying not to rant.
That's okay. I mean, in let me take this chance now that I kind of helped pick on Taylor Marshall a little bit. Let me kind of maybe redeem him a little bit. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't think I, I think the Taylor Marshalls of the world. I don't think the Vatican and sort of Pope Francis and those folks had a positive impression of conservatives or traditionalists to start with. I think it was confirmation bias for them. Like, I think it was an unfortunate opportunity for them to, like, see, this guy is exactly what
Yep.
what we what
No,
we
I
say.
totally agree with you. Like,
So it's sad because I really have a strong connection in heart for the traditionalists. I know why they're there. I know why I was there. Like, I get it. And it's a little sad that you know you know maybe the guy's up flying too close to the sun, maybe ruin it for other people. Now, I don't know. I mean, maybe the Latin Mass was going to get taken away anyway. I mean, it is kind of bringing back to what you said. I mean, it's an odd relationship to have the sort of the old right, the TLM, and not just the mass, but really, there's a lot of, I see it because of the stuff we talk about is people, it's not just a mass thing. Now they're like, Humana Vitae is wrong. We got, if you use natural family planning, that's evil. And, you know, really, you know, really going into some extremes in other ways, at least from my perspective.
yeah.
So there is that divide that is happening and is getting worse. I don't know where that leaves us, but it seems like an unsustainable thing. Something's got to give, and I think the Vatican is like, we can't go on like this indefinitely. Like, I don't
Right.
see a way to repair the relationship. So I guess we're gonna, bring out the thugs and do it that way. I don't know. I mean, if that's the mentality or not, but
Well, so, like, that's very interesting because, like, the when you say, like, Humane Vitae, because I've heard of that, but it's, like, very rare that someone says that they're against Humane Vitae and NFP.
mhm,
Um, like, usually you'll get, like, arguments of NFP of, like, contraception and all
mhm,
that stuff, and that doesn't make any sense. But
mhm,
the Humane Vitae thing, they'll reject it. Those that reject it, I've only met, like, I'm not even kidding, like, I can't even count them on my hands. Like, those that go to the TLM that reject Humane Vitae. And it's probably emotional. Like, it's an association with, well, the TLM got changed by Pope Paul VI. Pope Paul
mhm,
VI
mhm,
wrote this, and so that's like the problem. But that being said, the Humane Vitae being rejected is something that's happening on, like, the left and the right in the church. The left in the church wants to be like, well, we're taking in all the political bias as well. Like, we're going into climate change, we're going into population control. Like, Humane Vitae, like, I mean, we're smart. Like, they take Protestant arguments. They're like, well, we're smart creatures. Like, we should be able to regulate our bodies and blah 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 blah. And it's like, no, like, that's not what, like, like not in that way. Like you're not allowed to like regulate in that way because that goes against properly functioning body. But like it's interesting because they come to the same conclusion, but they're like doing this, and then the teaching is like right in the middle. And so then it's like, okay, well, you're both wrong. Like, because like it's very interesting with the political dynamic how much of that is influenced, and to me like um to me it's fascinating because you'll see like social justice. Okay, like you bring up social justice, it's like an allergy word for some people, but it's a Catholic word, like, and it was taken from Catholicism and placed in American politics to sway Catholics.
Mm-hmm.
Like that was that's the history behind this. And so like when people think of social justice, unfortunately they think of the Democratic Party definition and not what the Catholic Church says
Mm-hmm.
officially. So like you kind of got that play going on too. So I just thought I'd take a less intense example than sex, because sex always seems to make people go crazy. But
well, that's what we have this show for. and I guess, and I think maybe we just get a higher potency of the traditionalists who want nothing to do with NFP and all that, which has always struck me as an odd target. Of all the targets out there, of all the stuff going on in the church, you're going to pick on like the 4% of us Catholics that actually go through NFP and use it, because there's a reason most people don't use it. It's not a lot of fun most of the time, or at least some of the time. So it's just such an odd, like, really, like this is where you're gonna take it out. Like, good grief.
Well, no, you're right though. Like there's not a lot of and that's one of the reasons why I think it's an emotional response, because of Pope Paul VI, because he wrote that. It sounds great. It's absolutely prophetic. Like we're living in what he thought it was going to happen. And but like when you're trying to, I think you're right though, that, well, I don't actually know. I don't think you said this, but it can be viewed as a perspective of desperation, where you see as everything as being evil or against you because that's part of the group. So it becomes like like what is it, like Ben Shapiro or whatever, tribalism. Tribalism becomes an issue because now it's you fall into exactly what St. Paul talked about. Like, this isn't the Peter of Peter. This isn't the church. I'm sorry. This isn't the Church of Peter or Paul or whatever. And it's like that. I mean, it's in his name is Paul, like Pope Paul VI, and St. Paul talks about like not doing that. And so, you know, it inches them closer to sedevacantism when they start doing that. And like, yeah, like over here we have, I think, also a lot more reverent Novus Ordos than because we used to have a bunch of TLMs and some of them got dropped, but then we have a lot more reverent Novus Ordos now. And the next, like the younger priests are promoting that in the archdiocese. And so like our understanding here, I think, is a lot more cohesive than the random TLM parish amongst a bunch of modernist priests in like Oklahoma or something, where the diocese is vast and the Novus Ordos are everywhere, but there's one TLM here. And so it's kind of like they're in a quite literally a corner in their state. And so it pushes them to have this fight or flight understanding. And I'm not saying all of them do, but it's like when you look at it from a 5,000 foot view, like you start seeing like, okay, well, like that would make sense that a minority group would have that reaction because they feel like they're being targeted. And does the motu proprio target them? Absolutely. And there's a lot of problems with targeting a group that has growth especially in vocations. And so like, I don't know if the next pope is going to like rescind that or whatever, but like that's obviously speculation. But the evidence definitely, like the video that I did, TLM versus NO attitudes, like, we I kind of went into this because it matters, but it wasn't. It was before the motu proprio though. Like I did that before the motu proprio, so yeah, so it's slightly outdated.
Well, yeah, and I'm a little older than you, I remember now, and I'm bringing back memories because I remember growing up. We're what do you call reverts? I mean, I was born Catholic, but and we went to Sunday mass, but we really didn't do anything until my teenage years. My parents got interested in marrying apparitions, and we started going to all the stuff. And then pretty soon, you realize all the stuff that's going on in it was a liberal diocese. There was no good Novus Ordo. Like going to mass was just a traumatic experience because you spent all the time looking at all the stuff why are they doing that, right?
Yeah, you just want to close your eyes.
Yeah, you're just like, I'm just trying to
hope to
grin
go
and
through
bear
it.
it, right? And then the first time I went to TLM, I was like, holy cow, I can go here and just have mass. Like I don't have to take a shower when I'm done. I don't have to, right? And I think that's how a lot of people, I think, got introduced into it. And it was almost like this underground. Like I remember for a while we had to go to this little tiny chapel in this hospital in a different state and it was a priest from another, like the whole thing was like this underground railroad, and
That's what it definitely feels like at times.
it does. In some parts of the country it is. But, at some point, communities started to grow. So you look at, the Detroit area where, you start having generations of people in a parish community. That was one of the big things that I missed, or that I longed for, that kind of led us towards the Novus Ordo. Is there the Latin Mass we went was this one of the only ones in the area, and people were from all over the state. You came to Mass and then you left. Like there was no community where your kids grew up and they had first communions and stuff together, and it was a place you went to mass, but that was about it. But you have these places where because I think that's important. I think that parish community is important, that some of these places are having, and we need that. But there are those pockets where it's, like I said, it's just kind of this refuge, I guess, from what's going on, and I think that tribalism, and I think, and the other thing too is this. It reminds me a little bit of, not to get too political, but like kind of the environmental movement. Like when they started out, they were like we had toxic crap in rivers, and then they went after stuff in the oceans, and then we're very successful, and then one of the former Greenpeace guys says we kind of ran out of stuff. Like we fixed stuff, and you're always constantly in search of a demon, right? So an enemy that you got to fight, and we do that. I think that maybe what's going on is we don't realize that, hey, look, we've kind of won some of those battles, and now we're legit. Let's recognize it for what it is.
Right, a hammer looking for a nail.
Yeah,
and like so there's serious talks. So this is like just to bring it back for, well, okay, so with the community aspect that you're bringing up, it's very interesting that there are serious talks around one of our TLMs that the parishioners come and buy the land around, so, like they have their homes there because it's not a safe space. It's not a safe place. I'm trying to look at you and at the same thing. So it's not a safe space, and so when they buy it all, then their community is going to be right there, and they're going to be able to walk to mass and everything, and so hundreds of people are coming to, they're seriously talking about this. And do you have that for other parishes? Like, I mean, there's a reason why people are willing to spend probably in not the greatest market doing something like that, where they sell everything and they move somewhere to be with people who are going to, like you said, build a community with.
Yeah.
If people are willing to do that, okay, like that's what calls into question of whether or not it's prudent for the motu proprio, because that's a disciplinary action. It's not obviously faith or moral. So anybody who wants to like be like, well, you're against Pope Francis, it's like, you're talking about the fruits of what this happens, and that's like how we're supposed to test things. And if you're going to diminish a community like that, that's willing to literally pick up and leave and be together to establish a community together, practicing the faith, like that also promotes vocations and promotes vocations at a higher level. Like, at some point you have to be like, okay, well, why would you do that?
It seems like a dumb move. Like are they stupid or are they malicious? Like, I think that is sort of the question, because it just seems like a terrible move, regardless of how you feel about them.
But like, back to your, so like, because remember, like, and I want to bring it back because the stated reason why is unity and not to, so like it's unity. And so if unity is the reason why, like, it's almost like, are we going to get a reform of the reform? Like, because like, if we're going to have something that, if we're going to move past what we had, like what you stated earlier is like going back isn't necessarily the option or the appropriate option, because the Vatican II stated, okay, well, there's going to be these changes and these limits and restrictions. It didn't give us the Novus Ordo. The Novus Ordo came outside of the council.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. There was actually an interim mass between the council and the Novus Ordo coming out in 69 that a lot of people would describe as being like, oh, that's a great compromise. Like, we'll just go with that. And like, I would really like wonder if that something like that was pushed now, if that would be looked at as a compromise, and how many people who are basically the TLM only fans, which I think is, by the way, a terrible mindset. That's like one of the reasons why the trad pipeline is a thing, is you get into this mindset of like the TLM is the only acceptable form, and you start justifying other rejections of the faith. And that's not good. And then you end up rejecting a council, and now you're schismatic. So
well, yeah, and my observation, and I saw this play out like near here, where we had it was the Institute came in and they had a Latin mass in a parish, and neither side wanted to collaborate at all. Like, it seemed to me both sides bore some blame and needed to get along and compromise and wouldn't. And I think there was fault on both sides. You had the TLM folks who were like, it's the TLM or nothing. We're not going to step foot in your Novus Ordo mass or whatever. But at the same time, the Novus Ordo people didn't want to do anything to help even though the TLM brought in so much, collections went way up when the TLM, there again, it was so stupid. They drove them out. So I don't know. And I think that rift, unfortunately, has probably gotten worse. So I don't know if there is a way to compromise. It makes sense to me. It seems to make sense to you, but
well, so like with the Institute though, that's like their reason for existing.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's one of their reasons for being is the TLM.
Mm-hmm.
And so to have them like do the NO is against their charism.
Yeah.
And so that would be a problem. And so, and that's kind of like a defined thing. Like, that's like asking, like, well, I can't use that example with Catholics, but like a Republican, like, do you promote small government or at least less regulation?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Like, the answer is almost certainly going to be yes. Like, if you're going to start adding a whole bunch of regulation, they're probably going to say no.
Mm-hmm.
And so like, that's kind of like the thing where it's like, it's this stated thing with the Institute. I don't know the situation. I don't know how the dialogue went, but So I can't really comment on that, but there is a lot of animosity. So that's something like the memes about like I'm thinking of this one meme where the priest is facing away from the parishioners, and you have Kung Fu Panda, like the Kung Fu Panda. He's like boomer, and he's kind of like it's stated he's a boomer, and he's like, "Hey, like, why is your back towards me?" And it's just kind of like,
Yeah.
no, really, like that's a real problem because like that generation was so conditioned about having their like seeing the face of their priest that anything that looks different from that, they have to like it's a reaction that you're probably going to get. And so like going back to what you previously stated at the very beginning, like it doesn't take much for a priest to maybe you said that beforehand. No, it's been an hour. I'm sorry, but like it doesn't take much for a priest to change, like to move towards a Reverend Novus Ordo. The hesitation seems to be like, all right, the people who are giving money, are they going to stop giving money?
Mm-hmm.
And that's in my opinion, a terrible reason, because fundamentally, I think that lacks. Like, I get there's the practical aspect, and there's a whole bunch of prudential judgments that go with that, but I think there is a level there where okay, well, you got to trust God, and you got to just go, and that's why I also promote like on my channel, like very much so that like you promote good priests,
Yeah.
and
And back them up. Yeah.
yeah, because like that, like you just having a conversation with them about something that they're testing the waters out, and promoting, that leads to more reverence. That goes a long way, even in the face of uh, like a bunch of parishioners with money leaving.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I suppose it's easy for us priests that are trying to balance a budget, whatever. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. Everyone has a hard job. I mean, the bishops have a hard job. I mean, the Pope has a hard job. I mean, I
Yeah,
wouldn't want that job. I guess it's easy for us to pontificate about.
I mean, but it is though. I mean, like there's a level of there's the ground game, and then there's the like those that can see above the ground
Yeah,
and see the landscape beyond 5 minutes.
yeah,
And so, like, there's what is it? There was a survey that cited. Well, I don't think it's actually cited, but that they had asked the episcopate in the motu proprio, they asked the bishops what they thought of those with the TLM, and they don't actually ever state the results in the motu proprio or outside of it. We only know what we do know is from leaks that there was favorable opinion. There's generally favorable opinion for those that have TLM parishes in their diocese, and so that just leads to obviously problems because one, you're not being like from the standpoint of the motu proprio, you're not being transparent with what you cite in the document, and then the leak doesn't follow with what's being stated either. So now it's a matter of because like prior to the motu proprio, unfortunately, the motu proprio has done the complete opposite, where it's caused division. And like where you have people who like come out and state like like you just get more people saying the TLM is the only way, the NO is not valid, it's a modernist Masonic thing. And obviously if you've watched Mass of the Ages, they do a very good job of detailing like the history of how it came to be, and there are serious problems with how the Novus Ordo came to be. That being said, it's still a valid expression of the Mass. And so like that's where the problem is. And so again, it leads to like this ended up leading to more division because of the tribalism that we've already talked about.
yeah. Two things kind of following up on that. You know, the one with it's strange that the way it play, and I don't know how it is in other parts of the world, but it's strange in the U.S. at least because the dioceses that had thriving Latin Mass parishes typically had I mean, they were only there because they had a bishop that supported or at least saw the value. If the bishop didn't like it, you didn't have SSPX, or I'm sorry, you didn't have the Institute, you didn't have Society St. Peter and all that. So I know, like in Detroit, I mean, I think there was a lot of bishops who were like, I don't want to do this, but my hands are tied, right? And it was sort of forced upon them in a weird way because it really wasn't a problem locally. And where was the problem, or is there a problem anywhere that really warranted this? That it still doesn't make sense to me. Um, the other thing, and this is a completely different thing, but it kind of follows up on what you said. I will say this as a former traditionalist and as someone that observes how traditionalism has changed since I was part of it. I think there is a strong tendency to look back on history with kind of rose-colored glasses and look at it as all those were the glory days. We just need to go back. Well, I don't think it was quite the way that we perceive it now, and there's a reason. There's a reason why so many people, all the Catholics that grew up into the 1950s on the Latin Mass and the Baltimore Catechism and all this stuff. I mean, I don't think we can overlook the fact that many of them bolted at the opportunity to do something different. Now, that doesn't make it right, but I think you have to understand that just had Vatican II not happened, I don't think everything would have just stayed the same. I think there was going to be some momentum. I know you have a video on this, but
Yeah.
um,
Well, but like I agree with you. I don't think it would have. So, because like I make the point that the decline went worse
mhm,
with after the implementations of Vatican II. I don't say the decline wouldn't have happened
mhm,
because, and I'm very like in that video, I'm very careful with my wording precisely because I don't want to give the impression that one, Vatican II is a bad count, like a false council.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
yeah, and the other is I emphasize implementations of Vatican II, so that comes up with the spirit of Vatican II, which is when everybody's like citing Vatican II, but it's actually nowhere in the documents, such as completely removing Latin, which the complete opposite is stated, where it's like Latin should be preserved, like that's an explicit line in the document, in one of the documents, and so like the when sorry, one second. Yeah, I just lost my train of thought. I'm sorry. Like,
okay.
but
We're wearing down. You're an hour ahead of me. It's late there where you're at. So
yeah, it's well, yeah. So like, yeah. So all right, going. I got my thing back. Sorry, it's so sorry for the hiccup, but yeah, I think the decline would have happened
mhm,
regardless. Uh, but had Vatican II gone with an intermediate mass where people were learning English, or the vernacular or whatever with what was there originally, and then it shifted to the NO, that may have been better than the NO happening at all, because it not only changed what was it that result not only changed the mass, but it changed all seven sacraments and how they were done, and so that I mean it's a destabilizing force when everything you've practiced with like your grandparents practice like changes, and you're like, okay, well, why is this happening? And then you're told Vatican II did that, and so now you've got animosity. If the change is done horrendously, which we know for a fact happens, um then you're going to get animosity towards it.
my uneducated um, theory is that Vatican II should have happened sooner. I think I think what happened is we probably put off, or they put off, some of these things that probably could and should have been addressed earlier and more incrementally, instead of kind of allowing this logjam to build up, and then it just sort of like, if you never go to the dentist, you never go for periodic things, you go in 10 years and now you got all this stuff, like it's a nightmare. Like, go in and deal with some of these problems a little earlier, so you don't have this huge mess on your hands. I don't know, but that, it seemed like I think you're right. Like, it was so much all at once, and I'm not so sure that wasn't, you know, people not really acting a little more promptly. Maybe if we could have eased some of these things in, maybe it would have been different. I don't know. It's really hard to like go back and rewrite history and imagine what it would have been like.
Well, right, and it's really weird when people will come out and be like, "Well, I have access to the TLM and the Novus Ordo. I don't get the big deal." And it's like, well, like, do you know what a minor order is? That was removed.
Yeah.
And do you know what a what is it? Oh crap, what was it? Yeah, there's oh yeah, devotions like Ember Days.
Yeah.
Do
I
you
was,
know
I
what
was
Ember
going to
Day
say,
is?
this, yeah.
And so like, do you know what all of these liturgical season like based devotions that are just not part of the church anymore, or I'm sorry, they're not practically part of the church anymore.
Hmm.
Um uh like that is a huge problem. And then on top of that, there was a uglification of the parishes where they would remove the statues.
Yeah.
And so like I like when I it was really weird because you had people like really like armed like terrible approaches to like like because I had a rebuttal video where I clarified a whole bunch of like comments because
Hmm.
they needed to be clarified. But like it's this understanding of when you say the implementation of Vatican II, you're including everything we've just discussed and just how different that is from someone who's practicing all of those things to then them just being gone.
Hmm.
And it's like night and day to people. It's like, oh yeah, you look like the Lutherans next door,
Hmm.
like because they do, like
Yeah.
compared to what was
Yeah.
there.
Yeah. Yeah. It's sad. I don't know what should have happened differently. And I'm not sure where we go from here. I mean, we should probably wrap up, but what do you think?
Oh
So,
no, yeah.
what do you think? What do you think should happen, or what do you think? What do you think will happen with the TLM?
So like okay, yeah, that'll so if I was to bet it, I think that rumor was true, but that's me personally. That there will be some diocesan implementation. It may not be on July 16th. It may be on a different day, but something will happen. But at the same time, like in the future, because I know people are making projections and they're projecting way out. They're projecting too far to for them to be taken seriously. Because they'll say in 2055 or something like that, like there's going to be more TLM goers than Novus Ordos. And I'm like, okay, like you're not supposed to project past 5 years because there's too many variables.
Mm-hmm.
And so now you're projecting like 50 or 30 years into the future. And
Yeah.
it's like, that's not reasonable. That's not a reasonable estimate. But the, what is it? I don't think the TLM, I think the TLM will get some, if nothing happens, I think the TLM will get some prominence, but ultimately, hopefully in my lifetime, there is a combat, like there's a reform of the mass, and it looks like that intermediate mass, or it looks like the Anglican ordinate, where it allows vernacular, but a lot of Latin's still in there naturally. And because like when you go to Eastern Rite, I don't know if you've ever gone to Eastern Rite,
Mm-hmm.
their languages are in the mass. Like we're the only ones that dropped our language.
Mm-hmm.
And you go to Chaldean, you'll hear one of three languages: Armenian, Syrian, or Arabic. And that has to do with depending on it's kind of like a time frame situation, because each one represents a different time in Iraq. Arabic is when Muslims were in control and forced everybody to learn Arab, and then there's other times with that, but they're part of the mass because that's part of the culture and people that lived there.
Mm-hmm.
And so the fact that we don't do that, or that it got dropped, is like a real problem. And so there's an inconsistency. That's another inconsistency that we have with Eastern rites. We have two forms, and then we don't actually use the language that we have. Sorry,
Yeah, I mean, I think my final observation I would make is, I mean, I don't see, and you probably have a better sense for this than I do in terms of how far out, but if you go to a mass, the TLMs are full of little kids. The Reverend Novosordos are at least have kids, and then the bland vanilla ones, the demographics are like not promising. Like, I don't know how they think they're going to sustain a Catholic population without this group of people. So I think it may just be a matter of waiting them out, because they're not, the progressive side of the church is not having kids at all.
Well, right, and that's so weird, because like when you go to those like boomer parishes where it's just 90+% in that generation, there's some people who will say, well, why are you criticizing the boomers? Like, they're still faithful. They stayed during that time. And I'm like, yes and no, because yes, some of them did stay, but they didn't pass on the faith to their kids.
Yeah.
Or like they didn't, like, not enough of them did. And so we have this problem now, because like there's I don't know, when you grew up, how many would you say after you got confirmed went to mass?
Yeah.
Like,
I don't know, 25% maybe, something like that.
Oh, that's like way higher than mine. Like, I got confirmed in like early 2000s. Yeah, and so I was like one of, I think, 3 out of like 30 in my like little class. I know it's like small, it's a small sample, but like that's a common thing people are saying. Like, it's not just yeah. Sorry, I know I'm not trying to like get into another discussion.
No, that's okay. I mean, I think I am going to wrap us up here a little bit, at least. But yeah, I mean, I guess I don't know. I think a lot of it is going to hinge probably on who's the next pope, and my suspicion is the next pope's going to look a lot more like Pope Francis than Pope Benedict. But I don't know. I mean, that could make a big difference too.
Well, right, and like we don't. This is the weird thing, is the cardinals are humans, and yeah, some of them have, they seem to have a bad agenda. Like, they're just horrendous.
Yeah.
But then there's some that are like, they're very clearly not doing anything. They're like, we're not going to say anything. We're just going to be in the background. And those, I'm actually like, even though they're appointed by Pope Francis, like, that's a very good sign, because it means that they're like, at least it's an indicator that they're reading what's going on and how Pope Francis is being understood, because there is like a political aspect here. And so we haven't, what is it? Me and you have the same dynamic of popes, even though we're like, you're older than me, because Pope John Paul II was so long, and then it was really short with Benedict, and then Pope Francis. So those are the only 3 I've had. And like, and you've had, so like, there's this history of seeing like a pendulum swing that happens. It's just a matter of we haven't seen it because we've had so many, like, it's not like presidents that happen every 4 years.
Yeah.
And so they have a lot longer time frame. And so we won't see it until, like you said, the next pope.
Yeah. All right. Well,
oh,
I hate to put. You're probably asking the wrong guy, but we've done our best here to speculate as to why they're shutting it down. I mean, it seems to me that there is some mean spiritedness there because it doesn't make logical sense, as we've talked about.
yeah.
It doesn't seem to be a good strategy. But I think I think it is a combination of bad agendas on the left, but I think also the traditionalists haven't always done a good job of helping themselves, and that's the problem. I think there is some blame to go around that it makes it difficult to kind of keep score. I think a little bit.
And the last, I guess, the last point that I want to say is when it comes to what you said earlier. I forgot to go back to this because we've been talking about a whole bunch of tangents, and it's been a great conversation. And with Taylor Marshall, I think you're absolutely right. Though, is you have all the things I said that he did, and it's like, oh, this is how conservative Catholicism is. It's confirmation bias. Like that's. I didn't even think about that.
Yeah.
But like that like they don't need to deep dive into all the other conservatives. They just need to see, oh well, he's got like at the time probably like 700,000 subscribers. So like he's a huge, and he's on a political trail. Like he must be a good representation.
Well, I'm sure Taylor will be listening to this episode and unpacking it. So if you're still listening, Taylor, we wish you the best. I mean, I think we both, appreciate the good work you've done, concerned
Absolutely.
about some of the stuff, and see you as having a much greater opportunity to influence things in a positive way than we can. So I hope maybe this is an opportunity for him and others in his sort of stratosphere to push back and to represent and to be the better the better person in this fight, because I think they have an opportunity to do so.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you are watching, Taylor, I appreciate the fact that you had Exodus 90 because it has been very influential in my life.
Yeah.
Since 2019.
Yep. Amen. All right. Well, maybe we'll do a part two. We'll get Taylor on here and have.
Oh, that would be great. That'd be really funny.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone in the comments. I know the comments are still pouring in, but I've got to get home. I'm an early riser, and I know you've got responsibilities too. So I'm gonna sign us off here. For those that aren't all that familiar with you, where should they go find your show and follow you?
Oh yeah, and it's mostly on YouTube. I mean, I also go to X or Twitter or whatever, but it's primarily a YouTube function.
Okay.
And obviously anybody who's watched from my channel, because we're streaming live, do you want to talk about, because you typically talk about other things, not just what we talked about today? So I mean, if you want to do the same, just because we are joint, we are joint live streaming.
Yeah. I'm sure more people here know you than us. So we are we're at a core of what we do is talking the good, the bad, and the ugly of trying to be good Catholic married people. My co-host and I were. I'm father of 9. He's father of 4. We have struggled through, the ups and downs of marriage and tried to be good Catholics, and sometimes it's really tough, and sometimes it's wonderful. And we talk about that. We talk about all that, trying to be good Catholics, trying to wrestle with the rules and the failings and all that. That's the kind of stuff that we talk about. And so it would certainly welcome people to come over and join our community and participate in the comments, because it affects most of us. Most of us are married, most of us have kids, and it does impact us to some degree. So we'd certainly welcome anyone that wants to come over and participate in our community. All right. Well, everyone have a good night. we're going to sign off. So thank you, Ryan. Thanks. I appreciate this. Maybe we can do this again sometime. So
Oh yeah.
thanks everyone for listening. And until next time, have a good one.